Appalachia is full of history. And I've read a bunch of books on the mountains of Appalachia, especially around the Smokies, and they weren't all about fishing, although a lot were. Not all of them were about fishing anyway. Some of the books and the regular books and some of the fishing books revealed some real characters that lived out there, and some still do. So, Neil, can you tell us about some of the areas that you fished that might be known for some rough characters?
Yes, sir. Rough characters. That's I fish the Smokies mostly now, and about as rough as they get is trout bums and bears. Disreputable as a trout bum is about as rough as I see it, since nobody's been living in the Smokies for a while. I'm always hesitant to say there's rough characters in the backcountry just because I don't want to, misrepresent anybody as rough. But I've been some places that I think qualify before. There's I interviewed a fella for the book. He's named Ron Rash. He's an author and he's a poet. He talked about fishing down in a place called the Globe. It's beneath the Sampson Fire Tower in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, not far from Boone. And that was a place I always was told you went from the resort to the rough. Blowing Rock was the resort, underneath was the rough, and that was how it went. But he used to go down there and catch, have 40 fish days with his uncle. He told me it wasn't a dangerous thing at all. Probably the most dangerous I've run into was a place back up next to Virginia in North Carolina. It was streams that look a lot like the Smokies, but it was a place where the water used to be designated native in North Carolina. They used to have a native sign as opposed to delayed harvest or hatchery supported. It was a beautiful area, but the place back in there was one where you had to get permission to fish, and you wanted to be careful where you went when you got permission. There was old railroad grades. We would walk old railroad grade trails to get where we wanted to go. We'd pick up train spikes and take them out with us. I mean, this was a place that was kind of time forgot. You get back in there to fish, and there was old cabins, just old ramshackle cabins on the edge of the creeks, and they were rough. It was the sort of place where you could see from the fire pits they'd been having some kind of mountain hootenanny or something like that. It was kind of wild. I was young. Dad always kept me away. He said, "You avoid those places, stay away from them. Don't mess around. Don't give anybody a reason to think you're messing around." But everybody we ever met back in there was always kind. They were always polite. Their dogs were rough. They'd run you down getting out of the truck, but they were always kind and polite. They would let you fish. They didn't care. They would just yell, "Law, go on back in there and catch all you want." But it was rough country that looked like it promised something dangerous. The most dangerous place, dangerous. The most rough place I've been in was in the middle of a community not far from Boone. It was a little community sort of in a bend. I don't want to spot burn because it was a sweet creek. It was in the bend of a new river, and I was right around where it was a neighborhood, and I was fishing the little creek, and somebody fired off a warning shot. Didn't go in the creek or anything, but I'd been fishing up, hadn't heard anything, and I hurried back down and didn't hear anything. But if that wasn't a warning shot, I don't know what it was. Somebody fired one off.
I've been last year I was in a boat running down the middle of the river, and I was a passenger. And I had laid down on the bow of this motorboat, and the guy beside me was sitting up, and somebody shot at us and hit him right in the side.
Oh, good Lord, hit him.
Yeah, with some buckshot. It missed me or some shot. It missed me because I just happened to be laying down. My back was starting to hurt. So I was like, I'm going to lay down a minute and just stretch it out,
Yeah.
see if I can get it to uncramp or whatever. And yeah, I heard it hit the side of the boat. It hit him in the side, and yeah, we got out of there, but that's a whole other story for a whole other time. But do need to be careful out there. I mean, we were in the middle of a river. I mean, it is a big river too. So
that sounds rougher than what I've run into in the backcountry, to be honest. That's something. That's, like I say, I haven't seen much in the backcountry. I saw it more in the front country than I ever did in the backcountry as far as roughness went.
Yeah, we could veer into boat ramp stories before this is over with, but let's go let's go ahead and do the show introduction from high atop the world headquarters of Southeastern Fly. This is the Southeastern Fly podcast. Thanks for joining us on this episode. Feel free to share this with your friends and your fishing partners. Hit the like and click the follow. Sign up for the Southeastern Fly newsletter and get a jump on upcoming events and episodes. It's available in the show notes wherever you are listening to this podcast. Last month, we gave away a free fly rod. We've got other stuff that's coming up right now. There is a discount code for free fly. The discount code is SEF15. So you get 15% off of free fly if you listen to the podcast or if you're a client on the boat that are fishing with us. So, who's our guest on this episode of Smoky Mountain Fly Fishing Stories? He lives in East Tennessee. Obviously, he's interested in the Smoky Mountains. He fishes the park. He's a writer, has a book coming out this year. He's an author. The book is called Tight Lines and Tall Tale Stories of Southern Appalachian Fly Fishing. Like I said, it's going to be released this year. You can find him on Instagram at 5X Tippet. Please welcome to the podcast, Neil Norman. Neil, thanks for stopping by.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
So, a little background. I think I was looking at Ian Rudder's Instagram, and he was talking about doing some illustrations for a book. And your name just your 5X Tippet just happened to be in there. So I clicked on your name. And I thought, you know what, that'd be a really cool podcast. A guy writing a book about somewhere that I love and a lot of our listeners love to fish. And it brings in an element of not just fishing, which we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about fishing and that sort of thing. But it also brings in an element of the characters and the stories that I've heard some and read some, but there seems to always be more stories to hear about that area. It's like going back into Cades Cove, going into some of the old churches. It's almost like you can hear the music, you can hear the preaching, you can hear the conversations in some of the cabins. If you go in there, it's almost that way. It just takes you back. And these stories, I think, are going to be really good for not only for fly fishing, but for a little more knowledge on the mountains. And I hope it sends folks down a rabbit hole to learn more about the area and some of the things that go on, because it's really fascinating. I have read Horace Caphart's book, which a lot of people have. There's some dispute around whether he lived somewhere and knew what he knew or not. But I can tell you what, there's a lot of good stuff in there and a lot of good stories. And if some of them aren't true, they're still good stories. So, but let's get into the fishing here. I want to talk about the streams and that sort of time. And I've spent a lot of time fishing up there. Some would say, I think my wife would say extensively. I have a lot to learn about the fishing up there still, even though I've spent a lot of time about the streams and all that. So, Neil, tell us about your favorite type of stream and how you like to fish it.
I'll be honest, that's kind of a tough question. The type of stream I grew up fishing is a lot different than the type of stream I love fishing. Now, my heart's with both of them. I grew up fishing near Boone, North Carolina, in the New River Valley, North and South Fork. And it is water that I love, but it is not plunge pool water like you see in the Smokies. It's pasture water. So there's a lot of long riffles, a lot of long runs, sandy gravel bottom. You don't have the hole that looks as deep as something you'd see in Little River around here. There's sections of frog water in between the holes, a lot of frog water, and you'll catch wild browns mostly because it's warmer water, I guess. But I love that type of fishing. I grew up doing it, and I still do it with my dad when I get the chance to go back home. He likes to fish. He still loves the streams we grew up fishing, and we spend time on those when we get the opportunity. But I had my first introduction to water that kind of reminds me of Smokies water on one of the headwaters of South Fork. It's a little creek that's well, it wouldn't be spot burning to say what it is now. It runs beside the Mountains to Sea Trail and the Blue Ridge Parkway, so there's always somebody fishing it or photographing it or throwing rocks in it or something. But that's the stream I learned about Smokies type water with brook trout and rainbow trout and that kind of fishing. And that's the kind of stuff I love to fish now that I live 25 minutes from the entrance to the park. I guess my favorite water now takes some hiking to get to. It's not like the pasture fishing. You could just drive down the road and find the pull-off. There's places now in the Smokies that I adore, but to get on Smokies water where you're not fishing behind somebody, you've about got to hike 5 miles in is what it feels like these days. And there's some streams that I love to hike in too. Even some of the popular streams, you have to hike pretty deep into them to get to a place where you're going to catch some fish now. But it's worth it. Being in the Smokies is beautiful, and it's water where it's big or small, it's worth getting into. To be honest, the way I grew up fishing the water was kind of strange. I grew up with fly line's ugly cousin. We fished a lot of monofilament. We which sounds strange, I know. We would spool on a long stretch of monofilament. We used either yellow strand or chartreuse strand, something bright so you could see it. We'd run a level leader off of that and use split shot to keep our flies down. And to tell you the truth, the best split shot we used was the split shot my dad made, if you can believe it. He was a real do-it-yourselfer. His dad was a machinist, and he fabricated an aluminum mold that Dad could use to pour lead in and make his shot. And it was long, and we were convinced it didn't snag as bad because it was longer, like that football-shaped
Yeah.
lead. So
Yeah.
it kind of had that same. It would cut your line if he didn't if he didn't cut it just right. But
Yeah.
that was something that we like to use to get our flies down.
Is that like a pencil, shaped like a pencil, kind of, but smaller?
Yeah, it was sort of kind of like a little toothpick. It was just
Yeah,
small,
toothpick. Yeah.
and cut it down, and it would be, maybe half an inch, something like that, and have the split in it. It worked wonderfully. It takes a lot of time, and even for a do-it-yourselfer, I think it took more time than Dad wanted to do. Dad wanted to devote. So, but we'd fish that, and we would fish them on a filament, not always down and across. Now, when I fish it, I fish it more for streamers. It's the best way in the world to get a streamer. I mean, it's almost like you spin casting, having that monofilament and your streamer on. You can get it out there. You can work the fly. You can manipulate it the way you want it to. It gets right on the bottom of the creek with a tungsten bead or with split shot, either way. The way we used to fish it on those pasture streams, you'd cast up and just follow your drift all the way down. Cast, you'd raise your rod, you'd lower your rod, and at the end, you'd twitch it a couple of times because fish would chase it and you'd have the chance of getting on some. It worked wonderfully. Now, when I fish it in the Smokies, it's smaller runs, it's shorter runs, and it's water that tends to be just immediately deeper. So you fish upstream and you don't get as long a cast. You flip it back down, you pop a tension cast back up to the head, and you fish it again. And that's pretty much the way we do it. I say we fished it more on pasture streams. The man we learned it from was he was from Inca, North Carolina, and he liked to fish Cherokee, the Econolofty, pretty much exclusively, which is big water for Smokies water.
Yeah, it is.
It's beautiful. He liked to get at the head of the hole and fish down and across. He'd pinch on something like 3 split shot to get his fly down, and he'd get it right on the bottom of the creek. I'll be honest, it's a technique he kind of developed. He started fishing. Dad told me he used to fish level line, and that didn't work. He would fish, and if he saw the crook in the line move a little bit, he knew to set the hook. Then he switched over to the running line on a weight forward line, and then he switched over just to monofilament completely so he could get the fly down on the bottom. He swore by it. It was something like, I guess Joe Humphreys has some stuff about that in Trout Tactics, fishing monofilament. So it's something kind of, he didn't, this man wasn't a man who was reading fishing books at all,
Right.
but he was a guy who knew fishing, and he knew some strategies to get to him.
A lot of the Euro folks are fishing straight mono and stuff like that. But I don't remember what I was doing. I was reading something the other day, just a blurb on something, and they were talking about, I can't remember who it was now, but anyway, they were talking about how they're invented this new way to fish where they're using mono, and I was like, yeah, okay, I've heard this before in the Smokies, but it was back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. So I'm not sure you invented it, in 2000, but okay. But it all comes back around anyway. But cane and mono and stuff like that's been around up there forever. Sometimes born out of necessity, and sometimes born out of sport. But a lot of times up in the mountains up there, it was more of necessity of eating, being able to eat, being able to have fish at certain times of the year and that sort of thing. So nonetheless, it's not who invented it. It's just that it's interesting that these traditions are carrying on. And you were talking about fishing behind people, and it does take a long time sometimes to find where there's not another person. There's nothing better in my mind than being in the Smokies and having to work your way up the stream and take down and move under spider webs and stuff like that, because all right, nobody's been here for a while anyway. So I like that a lot. So
Yeah, there's nothing worse than seeing a footprint in the sand with the moss being moved a little bit. That's the
Yep.
worst thing you can see.
Yep. Yeah, all right, I need to be super camo or need to go somewhere else, one of the two, or give more and more time. Yeah, you don't want to see a wet footprint on a rock, especially on a hot day that's, it hadn't been there long, and I've been there too. So go back just a minute to some of the people up there, and I don't think you can talk about Appalachia in general without talking about churches. We got plenty of those in the South. And if you go in the buildings in Cades Cove or Cataloochee, walking through the cemeteries and thinking back, wow, what I can think of what it might have been like. But can you tell us about the preachers and that aspect of mountain life?
A lot of the folks I interviewed for the book have sort of a religious sense about fishing. They just mention it in passing, so it doesn't show up in the book a lot, but they would just make the comment that they felt blessed to be in a place where they could really enjoy God's creation. And again, I didn't put in as much because it was just a sort of a take it for granted sort of comment, one of those things they'd say just in passing. But my own experience, I know my dad had quite a few experiences with preachers fishing. My main experience is there was a preacher who put us on to a book by Don Howell about tying and fishing southern Appalachian flies. His son, Kevin Howell, works out of Brevard now, Davidson River Outfitters. And it was a book he wrote where I first ran into his version of a yellerhammer and a bunch of other flies too. I guess if you fish one, you fish, your own unique variety. But
Right.
it was a preacher, yeah, it was a preacher that put us on that. There was a preacher my dad knew. He was an interesting guy, apparently. His name was Whitey Campbell. He was an Episcopal minister, I guess priest, not a minister, but he was an Episcopalian, and he devoted a day of the week to fishing. He was as religious about it, Dad said, as he was about going to church and preaching. It didn't matter in Boone if it was snow, if it was rain, if it was fog. Apparently, Whitey was on the water his one day of the week. He was, like I say, he was religious to it. I know after he passed, Dad got a bunch of stuff from him, and as a kid, I was surprised. He got a float tube. And I remember being surprised because there's not a lot of places you can float tube up in Boone or around Boone. There's Price Lake and there's Little Sims Pond, and apparently he would fish those. But what Dad said was he would wear the float. He was an older man. He'd wear the float tube wherever he went fishing. If he was in the creek, if he was on the river, he had the float tube wrapped around him, so if he fell, he'd be safe. I guess he was having a different co-pilot. I'm not sure. He was
Yeah,
his
yeah.
co-pilot, and the tire was his safety. But he would fish, and he would fish Dad's sheep fly. It wasn't Dad's. It's a fly that's a local fly from North Carolina, but he loved to fish that fly. Apparently, after he passed, Dad went and left a couple flies on his grave. But he was just a really good guy. Apparently, he one time told Dad about a place to fish. My dad's cousin's a preacher. His cousin Kenny. And Kenny had been on to Dad to take him fishing for a while. He wanted to get him up on the water, wanted to get him back into the mountains because he's from off the mountain. He's from the foothills. And he was on to Dad to do it. And he finally called Dad and said, "Well, I'm free. Let's go." And of course, it had been raining for a week before that. There was no place where you could go. Dad told him, he said, "Kenny, anywhere we go, it's blown out. There's no place we can go to fish." But there was one place he knew that was not at the foot of the mountains, but at a place where it's wild. And there's nothing that's going to be a lot of houses, not a lot of silt, not a lot of all those kind of problems. If any place was run down, that was going to be it. And it's private water. And it was in the community where Whitey lived. And so Dad got permission from Whitey, and they left the car at the road, at the bottom of the creek. Whitey drove back up into the community and took him in there and set him out. He said, "You got 2 hours of fishing, and you'll be back to the truck." It was important that it was only 2 hours of fishing because Kenny was preaching a revival that week. He had to be back. He could fish in the morning, but he had to be at church in the afternoon and the evening so he could deliver his service. Well, they fished for 2 hours, and apparently there was no truck to be seen. They were back in there. They fished for a while, and so they fished a little longer. And Kenny said, "We're going to have to get out of here. I got to get down to that church." And Dad said, "Kenny, you're not making it to the church tonight if we're not at the truck yet." Well, Kenny was convinced they could still make it out, so they started hustling down the creek. And Dad fished. Dad's a fly fisher. He's got his old Hodgman waders with the felt soles. He could maneuver a rock. He could maneuver the creek just fine. Kenny, like I say, was a foothills fisher, and he wasn't used to that kind of travel. Apparently, every time Dad said he would get at the lip of the hole, he'd get right at the head of it, and he would just holler out, "Praise the Lord," before he jumped into the water. He didn't know what he was getting into. Didn't know if it was knee deep or if it was going to be over his head, but "Praise the Lord," he would holler to make sure he was going to be okay. And apparently, he went down the stream hollering "Praise the Lord" till they got down to he was soaked. Dad got him back to the house, and they had to put a house coat on him and let him dry. He was soaked. Had to put his clothes in the dryer, but he got out all right. He was safe. I guess that's the most preacherly story I've run into as far as being in the backcountry.
That is so Appalachia right there. I want to back up a minute. What's a sheep fly?
It's a fly that was originally invented by a guy named Newland Sanders out of Lenore, North Carolina. Mr. Sanders tied it with a brown hackle tail. The body needs to be as sooty gray as you can get it. Apparently, we tie it with dark muskrat and some rabbit underfur mixed in. And I think that's how Kevin Howe recommends it in his 50 Flies of the Smokies. That's how his dad recommended it too in his book. But it's got that muskrat body with the underfur. Then you've got a brown hackle at the front and two grizzly point wings that go back about the length of the body. So if you can picture it, it's got that brown tail, brown hackle, gray body, and then black and white grizzly wings that reach back. And now Dad tied it a little different. He always liked to take black ostrich herl and put a couple turns around the head to give it a thicker head at the front. Kind of like, what's his name? Holly Roseboro up in Oregon. He used to tie his flies like that. So I think Dad must have lifted that trick from it. It looked awful buggy, but even without the head, that's well, Don Howe calls it the Cadillac of flies, if that tells you anything. He's convinced it's a good one. And we still fish it when the water's up. Dad fishes it anytime. Water's up, water's down, but it's especially effective if the water's got some color to it. I think you could fish it. I think Kevin recommends fishing on a hook as big as a 6. So it's practically a streamer. I like it on a 10. 10's about as big as I go. 10, 12, or 14 are perfect sizes for that fly. It looks awful. It's just a good searching pattern. It just looks buggy.
Beads or anything, or put a bead on it?
Well, I guess you could. The original one doesn't call for it. And to be frank, I just use lead underbody.
Okay.
I've never used a bead, and I haven't seen. I know the Howes don't recommend a bead either, although you can put a bead on anything, I guess. Yeah. We use lead and shot to get it where it needs to be. But it's one that we like to fish on the bottom, and when it swings up, they like it.
Okay. Well, I've got that written down here, sheep fly, so I'm gonna look into that.
Yes, sir. I've got it. I'll just pitch myself a little bit. I've got about 45 flies at the back of my book that I got from different sources.
Okay.
And that's one of them. So it's if you didn't write it down, it's right there for you.
Okay. All right. I'll look into that one. That one's now you piqued my interest, and I'm always looking for a new pattern to go buy stuff for, and then tie 3 or 4 of them and forget about it for a year or two, and then find it again and say, oh yeah, I'm just going to tie a couple dozen of these. So I hear this sometimes when you're not catching a fish, people have a tendency to say, well, fish is not all about the catching. As soon as they catch a fish, that's out the window. And I'm the same way. And the older I get, the more I seem to agree that maybe the fishing's not all about catching. But for me, while I'm driving to the river, it's social. If I'm with somebody, it's a discussion of some kind. If it's catching up, if it's solving a world problem, I fish out of a drift boat. That's also social, where you go further into it. So I get my socialization mostly from fishing, and I enjoy fishing too. I love catching, so I think that goes without saying. But Neil, what can you tell us about the folks that you've met along the way, and how they influence your fishing and other parts of your life?
You know, you saying that just the socialization aspect is so important. There's a story an editor from Wildlife in North Carolina told me, Jim Wilson. It's a story about some fellas. There was 2 cabins on the Wilson Creek, back in the Wilson Creek Gorge, just above it. They would go to every opening day, and apparently half the folks that were there weren't even fly fishers, weren't even anglers at all. They were just there to visit. But the folks liked to get together, and they'd kind of physically harmonize as a group. You know, it was a very social situation. One of the guys, a man named Jim Dean, Jim Wilson, the man telling me the story, said that Dean always said he had a fine whiskey tenor. So whenever he had a drink or two, he could sing like nobody's business, is sort of his opinion of it. But they would apparently assign parts to a song called Fox on the Run. According to Mr. Wilson, the parts are just one person says like a fox, a second person says it, a third person, then a fourth person. And he said they would just sit around singing songs all night long, not even worrying about fishing. That'd be the next day, but just being social with each other and enjoying each other. But that kind of reminds me of that. Um, I guess the person who's had the biggest, you've already heard me mention my dad a couple times. I grew up with my dad teaching me how to fish, taking me out bait fishing in a pond for bluegill and brim, and um, taking me to trout fish. Taught me about fishing. He taught me about tying flies. I started tying flies when I was a teenager. I started fishing when I was maybe 7, 8, 5, 6. I worm fishing 5, 6, fly fishing 8 years old, something like that. And he taught me about telling stories. I like to hear a story. I learned that from listening to him. So I enjoy hearing stories and talking fishing. Um, I guess he's my biggest influence. His dad was kind of an influence on me too, my Papa Harold. He wasn't a fly fisherman per se. He came into it because my dad kind of got him into it. And he was kind of always, I don't want to say on my side because there wasn't sides between me and I remember when I was a kid one time we were fishing Cherokee again. My Papa Harold loved to fish that. He liked the big water. And I remember I caught a fish that was a stalker, and we tried not to keep the stalkers. We wanted to keep wild fish because we ate them at the time, and they just taste better. But I hooked into a stalker that was a decent sized stalker, and we put it back. Dad said, "No, that's a stalker. We don't keep that." And I understood because that was the rule. And then Dad caught a little redfish that was smaller, and we kept it. And I was a little surprised, and my papa stuck up for me. He's like, "You can't keep a little fish when you made that boy put his big fish back. You
Yeah.
can't do that." But like I say, it wasn't sides or anything. It was just, we didn't keep the stock. I understood eventually. They explained to me, but my Papa Harold always kind of, he would look out for a grandson in a way that grandpas do, I guess. Um, I guess the man that probably influenced me the most was Mr. Miller that I was talking about before, the man who fished the monofilament in Cherokee. I loved his sense of humor. He had a real dry sense of humor. Um, I know if you were fishing at the tail end of a pool, he always took the head of the pool. He was the older fella. He was kind of our guide, so we let him fish where he wanted to fish. He'd always take the head so he could swing his fly down through it. And you'd be fishing down at the lower end, and all of a sudden something would be splashing at your feet. There'd be a commotion. He'd always hook a fish and play it right down under your feet, so you wouldn't know what was going on until there was a fish there, just making a commotion at your feet. It was his way of doing that. He had a great sense of humor. Um, there was a buddy he had who was convinced he was a bait fisherman because he could catch fish so good. And one time he pranked him. He picked up some kind of bottle or something on the side of the creek. And every time he'd catch a fish, he knew his buddy was watching. Every time he'd catch a fish, he got that bottle out, he'd shake his fly dry, and he was fishing wet, so there was no reason to do that. He'd act like he was spraying something on it just enough so he could see that bottle. That man was convinced. My dad was there. He said that fella hollered out and said, I caught you," and he ran over to him to see if he was baiting or if he was putting spin on it or what. But that was just kind of Mr. Miller's kind of his sense of humor. He watched me fall over one time. I remember, and I stuck my fly under a rock and I pulled it loose and I stuck it in a tree and I was yanking to get it out of that hemlock and I sat down in the water. The fly came floating down, but I sat down in the water. I lost my footing and sat down, and he was sitting on the bank just watching. He kind of always had this smile on his face. He didn't say a word when I was snagged in the rock. Didn't say a word when I was snagged in the tree. He didn't say a word when I splashed in the water. I got up and got back to the bank. I was emptying my boots out, draining them out and trying to get dry. And he just leaned over and said, "You better keep that fly. It's got some squirrel hair on it." He wasn't a guy. That was the only advice. That was the second piece of advice he gave me. Keep the fly because it has squirrel hair on it. He gave me one piece of advice one time, which I've already mentioned. He said, when the fly gets at the end of the drift, twitch it a few times. Dad pulled me aside and said, he's never told me a thing. He was kind of a teacher by example. He didn't really teach by guiding you or telling you what to do or how to do it. He let you fish the way you wanted to fish and catch fish how you wanted to catch them. Nobody could catch him like him. I've been there numerous times when I was a kid, and he would finish out my limit. He always kept fish, and I'd catch 3, and he'd get us to the regulation 7 or 10 before we left that day. So he could catch fish. He knew what he was doing. But
That's funny.
I'd say he's probably one of the ones who's influenced me and my dad probably some of the most of anybody around.
For folks listening out there, raise your hand if you started fly fishing, catching bluegill and brim. There's no telling how many bluegill have taught fly fishermen how to fly fish.
Oh yeah.
And you wouldn't think it. The normal person on the street wouldn't think that. They would think, oh, fly fishing and trout. That's what you do, but it's not that way at all.
I still like catching bluegill and brim on a fly. I'll be honest. Sometimes it's fun to go to a pond with a popper and just have a good afternoon, I think.
Absolutely. It really is. Keeps your reflexes too, which is needed. So it sounds like the Smokies have had quite an impact on your life. I know they have on mine, and I wasn't there for a long time. I packed in a lot of fun and a lot of days on the river while I was over in Knoxville. And not just the streams and the water or the fishing, but also just the environment itself impacted me. And so, how did the Smokies impact your life, your fishing life, and just your life in general?
I like feeling connected to there's something about these Southern Appalachian. I guess it's because they're so old. I like feeling connected to the age of them. Again, when I grew up in the New River, I was always told growing up that the New River is second oldest in the world. I don't know if that's the truth, but I always loved the thought of that. There was one summer I did some teaching over in the Middle East, and I was teaching. I visited Egypt, and I got to stick my hand in the Nile.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'd waded wet earlier in the year in the New River. I was convinced I'd been in the top three as far,
Yeah.
you know. But I've always loved that connection to something older, and to the stories that go along with that. In the Smokies, there's a newer sort of old than the New River. It feels like to me, just because there's more of a human age to it, you know? There's all the stories of people who've lived there and the things they've done that really seem to stand out. Um, I know I love hiking in and seeing the places where old homesteads were. I love to see those. I love hearing stories. I fished on the back end of Hazel Creek one time. I hiked in the long way. I hiked in from
Oh, wow.
Kawauhi, and it was a long hike from Kawauhi up AT, um, down Cold Springs, down Welch Ridge, down into Hazel Creek. But you meet a trail junction down there for Bone Valley, and it's a beautiful little. I only fished the bottom. I should have fished more of it, but I was there to fish Hazel. But I walked up it a little ways. Bone Valley has the one of the coolest names of any valleys in the Smokies, I think, and it's a valley with a story, and that's one of the things I like so much about the Smokies. Apparently, back in the late 1800s, I may be making a date up here, but a long time ago, there was a fellow who thought it was, I guess, safer in the spring than he realized. He was driving his herd back in to graze higher up on the mountain, and apparently a blizzard blew in just sort of out of the blue and caught the cattle. Apparently they all died, and the valley was just for years left with the bones from the carcasses, and that's where it took the name Bone Valley from.
No kidding.
Yeah, and by the time I didn't see any bones, but I just like the story. I like the idea of that being something that happened back in there. I always thought it was kind of cool. Um, there's places like going in to fish some of the small creeks around Madron Bald. Old cabins you see you can go into. It's just kind of neat to know you're a part of something that's been there for a long time and that somebody else understands too. Um, so I'd say that's probably had an influence on me, just my appreciation for the fishing that I do and for how I'm fishing. You fish old flies that have a history, their history. Um, you fish old places that have a history, their history, and there's just something kind of grounding in that. And I really appreciate how grounding it is. It's just some way to appreciate what you're doing more than just catching fish. There's a depth to it that I don't know if you get in other places as much as you do in the Southeast, as much as you do in the Smokies or somewhere else. It just seems to be something that's got a lot of richness.
That is one of the most interesting answers to a question I think that I've heard in a while, because I've thought about the flies, but not the history of the flies. I think that's interesting too, the history of the place. I mean, I've fished, and I'm not going to name the creek, but I was fishing for brookies one time way up, and I don't remember why because it was raining like crazy. That's why we had to get out of there. And you've seen the water come up there from time to time. Well, just what people are imagining that have seen the water come up, that's what was going on. So we were hightailing it out, basically bushwhacking back up to a trail that was way up the side of the mountain. It felt like it was another couple thousand feet. It was probably, maybe another 200 feet or whatever, but it felt like it was, by the time getting my cardio, But we were trying to make it to the trail, and when we popped up on the trail, we were right in a clearing that was on the side of a mountain, but there was a flat place, and it was all cleared out right there. That's what the clearing was, and just some rocks there that weren't in a square, but you could tell they were just old rocks from an old foundation that had been scattered a little bit, but not out around. And you just think, wow, what? I wonder what went on here. What was this? 'Cause we were way back in there, but I mean, people live way back in there, or had a cabin way back in there for hunting or whatever. And I've thought about that several times. Like, I'd love to. I would never be able to find the place now, probably, but I would love to go find it and just poke around and see what I could determine was in there. But as you put the flies together, I hadn't thought about that much. The flies with the area, all that together, and now I'm thinking, well, maybe this is a opportunity to get some bamboo, but I don't need that. But I don't want to go. That's one place I don't want to go is bamboo because I know what I would do.
Yeah, so that's the rabbit hole. That one will take you in. Easy to follow down, I've heard.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've thought my way down it several times and fought my way back. So think my way down and fight my way back. So we love to talk food here, and for anybody that's listening to one of these, you know what's coming up next. This gives us a jump start on where to go if we're going to fish somewhere. And we don't have anywhere in particular that we're talking about, Neil, you and I are. We're just talking about the Smokies in general, but I've personally used info from this podcast to find the best places to eat when I go fishing somewhere, and I haven't been led astray yet. So, can you give us some good places to eat when you're up in the Smokies doing a DIY?
Where I go in is toward the Townsend side. Where I live, I'm about, like I say, 25 minutes out of the park. There's two places I love to go, and one of them's good if you don't have a lot of time, and one of them's good if you got time to sit down and enjoy your meal a little bit more. They're both good meals, great meals. The first one, if you're kind of in a rush, is Peaceful Side Social in Townsend. It's 3 or 4 years new now. It's been around for a little while. I might be wrong on that. It's not been there that long. But it's got great sandwiches, got great appetizers, but you go there for a pizza or for a taco. And it's absolutely delicious. There's outside seating, there's inside seating. It's just a place for family, place for kids. It's family friendly. It's a wonderful spot. They've got the brewery that's located in Maryville that helps to sort of feed that, and they've got all kinds of decent drinks on tap if you need a beer or whatever. But it's got everything you need there for a meal when you're just off the water, you're tired, you want something kind of fast.
Is that one right by the IGA?
Yeah, it's right by the IGA. It's sort of in between the IGA and Little River Outfitters.
You can see Little River from the seats in there, right? Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's worth checking out when you get a chance. The other one, you kind of have to get off the road just a little bit. It's called Dancing Bear Appalachian Bistro.
Oh, I've heard a lot about that.
Well, I'm partial. My girlfriend is the pastry chef there.
Oh, okay.
And I get to try all the sweet experiments she's working on for dessert. So I love that. That alone is a sales pitch for me.
Yes.
But everything they've got there it's a place where you want to take your time. If you don't have the time, you don't want to go because you want to really sit and indulge in it. I guess the last time I was there, I had some kind of plum glazed duck breast.
Oh, yeah.
I don't eat normally at home. That was delicious. It was absolutely, and they've got a pork chop that I've had a couple times. If you're not sure what to get, you think you know about pork chops till you get this one. It's huge. It's got spoon bread and other things with it. It's wonderful. But that's a place to go, and that one's more of an experience than just a place to eat.
Yeah.
You get your food at Peaceful Side, and it's wonderful. It's a positive experience. But you get the experience and the food at Dancing Bear, it feels like. And make sure you get dessert if you go, because, like I say,
always
my girlfriend will do you right. So
yeah, a little plug there. It's okay. You should give her that. Yeah. When we go out to eat, we don't do that often, but like if we're going as a family or something, we're going to get at least one dessert and split it between all of us. If we're too full to eat, we're still going to do that because, man, if you don't have dessert, it's like you miss out on some of the character of that restaurant. And in your case, it brings into the conversation of, hey, I know the chef, I know the pastry chef.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. So yeah, and I've heard that it's just next level up there.
It is. Well, they just won a bunch of, again, I'll sing their praises a little bit. They just won an award as a contest in Knoxville that I think guess it has categories for appetizers, entrees, desserts. I think I'm missing something. They swept it. It's the first time it's ever been swept this past year for all categories. My girlfriend had a dessert that was, I need her here telling you what it was. It was fancy. It was delicious, but it was fancy. You know, it did its part to help them win. So it's a place to listen out for. It's good.
Yeah, yeah, that's a take your bride, take your significant other there and do it upright.
Yeah.
The only other place that I really, well, the ice cream place when you first come out of the park on the right. I mean, stop.
Burger Master.
Yeah, stop and get an ice cream is,
Yeah.
everybody should do that. I've come out of the park before and they're not serving hamburgers. And I had been thinking about one of their hamburgers for about 4 hours and they were closed, basically closing down by the time, of course, by the time we got out of there. So I settled for an ice cream and then we drove to Wendy's and got a hamburger because we've been hiking up there all day. But the other place is a place called Townsend Abbey. It's kind of like on the river, but in an old church or something there. And it's really nice. But they have a heck of a steamed sandwich that I found down there. It's really good, really good. So yeah, there's plenty of places to eat over there, and all three of those are good.
Yeah, the Abbey's wonderful being right there on the river.
Yeah.
There's some great seats. So whatever you're eating is going to taste better because you're right there on the little river. It's
Exactly.
beautiful.
Yeah. And they've got outside seating there in the spring, summer and fall, and then the inside is done up. They've got just a lot of seating area there, and they've got a little bar in there and beer on tap and all that. So it's a cool place. So I could talk about food all night, and that's not what we're here for, sort of. So Neil, we've got one question, and this is always a fun question, and everyone has an answer for this one, but everybody's answer is different. So tell us your one that got away story.
One that got, you know, that's something I asked everybody I interviewed for the book too. They're one that got away, or the biggest one they call.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I love that. I love those stories. They're some of the best we ever get to hear, some of the most fun we ever get to tell. I guess my biggest one that ever got away was on a little creek, a little tributary of Watauga Lake up in northeastern Tennessee. It's a creek that it's not a spring creek, but it's about, I think I read one time it's something like 92% spring fed, but it's still a freestone, but it's got plenty of spring. You know, in the winter when you're there, you'll still see some greenery on the sides of the creek. And you don't see as much ice and stuff. It's a pretty little creek, but it's kind of, it's a residential stream. So you see a lot of, you'll see trash in it that's washed out of the back of people's yards. But it's still a creek worth fishing. It's a pretty creek. We used to fish a lot in the spring and the summer and in the fall, but mostly spring and summer because you would catch a million little native fish, million little wild rainbows. It was just chock full of them. The reason for that, we found out eventually, was that there's a spawning run up out of Watauga Lake of rainbows, which will surprise you. I found out the history on it. Back in the 50s, apparently, they started trying to stock some fish to have a spawning run. I was on a night hike in Cades Cove, and one of the interpretive guides, or whatever they're called, he was a former game warden for Tennessee Wildlife Resources Commission, and he said that they helped them stock it with, I guess, rainbows from Snake River back in the 50s. They had up gates and things so that coarse fish couldn't get up through there and run to, and it was just for the trout. I know back in the early aughts too, there was I think it's the Trout Unlimited Club or some of the groups back in there tried to stock trout from British Columbia in there to get some spawners running. But I think the spawning run, truth be told, the locals are a little hard on them. I know I told us people who would catch them, and they would catch them for the fish, but more for as much for the roe as for anything. They'd make little roe sacks out of pantyhose in the roe. They'd pack the eggs in it and knot them off and tie it to a hook. Catch more fish. They love to get the roe as much as the trout themselves. I didn't know all that when I lost my good one, but it was a spawner is what I lost. I figured it out since then. That's what it had to be. This creek it's not much wider than an 8.5-foot fly rod, 9-foot fly rod. I mean, you got a couple more feet and you're touching the other bank. With a Euro rod, you'd be able to touch the other side easy enough. But I was fishing in the winter. Dad and I were in there, and he'd gone upstream to a section that was particularly productive in the spring. And we assumed that'd be the place to catch them. There was snow on the ground. There was so much snow on the ground, you'd feel it, you'd wobble on your feet.
Yeah, right.
I was piddling. I was killing time waiting for him because I'd fished upstream to him and he'd gone on around the bend. And I just said, well, I'll wait here for you. Fish all you want. And this was a pretty deep pool. It's got a little water at the head. It's pretty flat. There's a big sycamore that leans out over it and a big root ball at the bottom of the sycamore that it's easy to get tangled in if you fish up in the water and let it wash down through. I was killing time with I had a sheep fly on, actually. I had a size 10 sheep fly, that one I was talking about. And I cast it to the top and I swung it and I pulled it just a little bit so I didn't catch that root ball. I just gave it a twitch. And when I did, something came out. I could see it. Something came out after it. And I saw enough of it to see it was a fish of some size. I missed it. And I just knew that since he'd come out that far, it was done. I'd spooked it. I cast in again, and this time my cast wasn't as close to the root ball as I wanted, and he came out after it. And I could tell he was a big fish because when he was swimming, it was just those big S curves.
Oh, yeah.
Like a little fish just, this was big. I could tell he was something. And I got excited and stuck my fly in a tree branch behind me, and I was able to get that out eventually. One of those things. And it took a little while. I had a few more casts, and finally that fish came out and snagged on my sheep fly. I hung him up. I had him. And he was on, and I say snagged because I lost him. I don't think I must have foul hooked him or something, but
Yeah.
I had him on for a while. He ran down the bottom of that little pool, and I saw him come out of the water just a little bit. He didn't jump out of the water. I just saw his dorsal fin. I bet it was 4 inches long if it was an inch. It just looked like it, and he turned on the water. It looked like what you see in Jaws. It looked like a shark moving through the water. It looked so big, and I was younger, so it looked even bigger to me. But I saw him, I felt him, and then all of a sudden, all at once, my fly was in the tree branch, and that was the end of it. I don't know what I did wrong, if I just, like I say, snagged him instead of hooked him, or what happened. But man, that was a good fish. I don't know how to measure them by their dorsal fin, but if I were going to guess, I know it was one of those spawners. I know it was over 20 inches. That's my best guess. Didn't get a good look. I caught a fish in there years later, a spawner that was just it was like a steelhead, just like a silver football. It was about 18 inches. But I wonder how big that other one was. He was a beast.
It's interesting you said, I don't know what I did wrong. I get that, and I mean this. I get that a lot especially with new folks that are learning, even folks that have been around a little bit and they're learning to do something new with me, in the boat, and they'll hook a fish and lose it. And they'll immediately turn around to me and go, what'd I do wrong? And there are so many times that I'm like, I didn't see you do anything wrong. The fish just spit the hook for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I don't see any slack. I don't see you pulling too hard. I see you kind of doing what we're talking about, guiding the fish, left or right, depending on what he's doing, trying to keep your rod on the right side of his head and all that stuff you were doing right. And you know what? The fish just won that time. It's not always something we do wrong. It is a lot of times, but it's not always,
That's good to hear, because I was convinced I was younger, so I wasn't that much young. I was that much younger, but I wasn't a young fisherman. I was probably in my 20s when I lost it, but that's been 25 years ago. But I knew better, I felt like. But yeah, I like hearing that it's sometimes just the fish instead of the fisher.
Sometimes they just win. You mentioned a night hike at Cades Cove?
Yes, sir.
What is that all about? I haven't heard of that.
They do that sometimes if you're out there camping in the front country campsites, because there's not a lot of backcountry. You can't get close to the cove on the backcountry camping. They'll close the gates at sundown, and you can walk the road for a certain distance, and then they'll walk you back through the field, and you'll come back around. You don't do a full 11-mile hike around the loop. But we were there, and they get you out there, and they're telling stories of the people who lived there, like the Tiptons and some of the other ones.
Uh-huh.
And you're seeing it under the moon. We heard coyotes, which made it somehow, I don't know, made it kind of magical, made it strange at least.
Yeah.
I had my kids out there. We saw a mother bear and 3 cubs go up a tree. We all had our flashlights with red cellophane on so we wouldn't scare wildlife, but we were a pretty big crew, so they heard us coming. We ran them up a tree. It was a chance to sort of engage with the history without having the crowd of trucks and cars and bikes and all that around you. You know, you could really just walk and enjoy it and see it. And I don't know, it was sort of a solitary experience, even with a crowd. You know,
Yeah.
it was neat.
Oh, I would love to know what it's like back there at night, like back.
Yeah, it is. It is quiet unless those coyotes are going. It is, you know, you hear everything.
Yeah. Yeah. There could be two that sound like 30.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
way coyotes are for sure. Yeah. That sounds interesting. I'd like to do that. And again, you find more history out about the area, especially the Cove. The Cove has so much history.
And so much you don't get to see if you're traveling. There were like, what was it, like 200 families living in the Cove
Yeah.
before they, I mean, there's so much history that you don't even know, even when you know the houses that are along the road. Or like that, there's that tree they've got that was the D-Day tree. I'm going to mess up the story if I try to tell it. It's back in the Cove somewhere where you can find it. I'm not sure where it's at. I've never seen it before, but I've read about it. It's one that had been planted, I think, for D-Day or for, I'm not sure what it was. I'm messing it up to tell it. But yeah, something. And it was a commemorative tree, and it's grown up through what they'd planted it in now and grown into it. And there's just so much stuff like that back in there that nobody knows about, or everybody knows and nobody tells, or
Yeah, right.
I don't know. It's rich with history.
We did the Cove 6 or 8 times in 1 week or something like that, looking for bears.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And didn't see a single one. I don't think, maybe that was the time we did finally see some. I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, I've been up there a whole lot of times and seen a minimal number of bears till we went to Gatlinburg, and now they're, they were everywhere over there.
I hope you got to fish Abrams when you were in the Cove.
I did not do it. I need to do that. So that's on my bucket list of things to do.
Yeah, my bucket list has the horseshoe on it.
Yeah.
I've been in Abrams, like the little horseshoe, but I'd like to fish the big one.
Yeah, that's my idea. That's my ideal place.
Beautiful water along the trail and everywhere. I need to fish it more as close as I am. It's just the challenge of getting, 6 miles back there to the Abrams Creek trailhead, and I don't know. I don't like fighting the crowds as much as I'd rather hike 5 miles in and be, in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I could talk about this all night long. I won't, but I could. But you ready to close this thing out?
Surely.
Thanks for joining us on this episode. Feel free to share this with your friends and fishing partners. Hit the like and click the follow and sign up for the newsletter wherever you're listening to the podcast. When you get a chance, give us a positive review wherever you're listening. So who is our guest today on this episode of Smoky Mountain Fly Fishing and Stories? He fishes the park. His upcoming book, Tight Lines and Tall Tales, Stories of Southern Appalachia Fly Fishing, will be released later this year. Go follow him on Instagram at 5xtippet. Neil Norman, thanks for coming out for the show, man. Really appreciate it.
I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I've really enjoyed myself.
You just listened to Neil Norman on Smoky Mountain Fly Fishing and Stories on Southeastern Fly, and we'll see you next time.